people are still joining.
Okay.
Meenal madam, can you please unmute Sakshi and Shaili so that we can begin?
Yes, ma'am.
You also unmute sir so that we can begin. I'll just message him that we are starting.
Yeah, done, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, Shaili, you can begin.
Yes, ma'am. Very good afternoon to respected Director Gauri ma'am, faculty members and everyone present here. I, Shaili Gaur, take immense pleasure in welcoming you to the Creative Pursuits, a talk series and architect's journey. Today we have respected architect Dean DeCruz sir amongst us. He is the co-founder of the award-winning firm Mosaic Goa. I heartily welcome you, sir. I now request Gauri ma'am to welcome sir by saying a few words.
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. Respected Architect Dean DeCruz, sir, my colleagues, professionals attending this session and teachers and my dear students, I immense pleasure to welcome Architect Dean DeCruz on this platform. This is the fourth webinar in the series in the talk series Creative Pursuits and Architect's Journey. This talk is about his or her inspirations, aspirations, his or her journey from being a student of architecture to reaching wherever he or she is right now. And the purpose behind this is the students get inspired. Not only the students, but all of us here get inspired through your journey, and we learn a lot. We have learned a lot in last three lectures, and I'm sure we are gonna learn more in your lecture as well. So thank you so much for accepting my invitation and being here on this new normal, on this new platform, which has brought the world quite closer, you know. So it would have been really difficult otherwise for you to travel all the way and for my students to listen to you. So this is a great opportunity for all of us to listen to you. So thank you so much for accepting my invitation and being here.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me here.
Over.
Should I start, or is there something else?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, thank you for inviting me here to be with you all today. I just basically want to share with you my roughly 35-year journey from being a student of architecture, just graduating to the present day. So it's been a fair amount of transition from one sort of approach to architecture as a young architect and to what we're doing today. But there are a lot of common threads that one sees throughout. So I'd really start with anchor slides of where. Can I share my screen now?
Yes. Meenal ma'am, please allow him to share the screen.
Yes, I allowed.
Okay, good. Yeah, so really, I mean, the office is representative of what an architect does. The way your office looks, the way you run an office. And is the screen okay now?
Yes, sir, it's
It's
perfect.
full. Okay, good. Okay. So yeah, so Our first office really was in an old building, an old sort of structure, which is almost uh, falling down. And so we renovated it. And I initially partnered with Jared DeCuna, and Jared had worked in a Laurie Baker style. As a student of architecture, I enjoyed technology, enjoyed new things, and trying uh, a very sort of contemporary approach to architecture. But coming to Goa and being influenced by Laurie Baker's sort of architecture changed the way I really practiced. And in the early days, we worked with low-cost housing. We actually built all our houses. All our initial houses were designed by us. Our office, of course, we use recycled materials, all just old construction waste, steel, the typical bricks, using them as jalis, the China mosaic. Everything was really sort of low cost, and it was reflected in the architecture of our houses. And today, we're very different. Our office is no doubt at the edge of a forest. It's a large space, and uh, it it has a very different sort of style of uh, sort of connecting to each other, where people work in a more collective sort of arena. So early projects were really about using waste material, recalling traditional building systems, and where we tried to uh, save the crafts. So there were craftspeople who we sort of re-engaged in building construction sites. We built about almost 50, 60 houses as not just acting as architects, but as contractors as well. And so over the years, we actually trained about 200 masons, building mainly in masonry, avoiding concrete, arches, walls, domes. And those people are now become contractors themselves. So every house was completely unique, uh, based on each client's needs. They're very specific, small, and closed. But slowly over the years, we started getting it in architecture was far more open. We started getting influenced by the fact that an architecture needed to breathe, needed to connect to the outside, and it was an architecture that was very pavilion-like. But still, again, recycling materials, responding to the local sort of architectural sort of vocabulary of the area. Uh, but we also started getting influenced by the architecture of a more appropriate sort of response, and that's the architecture of Kerala. And the Kerala architecture, as you may be knowing, is an architecture where the roof is the most important element. The roof is really the umbrella of the house. It extends over it. So the typical elements that you see in a Kerala architecture of the dormers that come to the space, of these strongly pointed wooden roofs spreading over things, became the sort of vocabulary that we use in our houses. Yeah. So the houses really became pavilions. There were these giant pavilions, and we've designed over the years almost 300 houses in different parts of the country as well. Uh, and every part of the country, of course, has a different response to it, depending on the climate. So whether it's a hot and dry climate, or a humid climate, cold climate, and every climate is challenging, and there's new things to learn about it. But in Goa, especially, we create a lot of these pavilion-style buildings where you can actually live on the outside. So uh, they would not just be the rooms which are closed by windows that could open out, but there were also these connector spaces which just flowed in and out. Normally in a house you have a veranda which is on the edge of the house, but our open space were actually between rooms. So there were just these bridges of open spaces which were protected. And uh, our houses are really transparent because we don't have issues of security or privacy so much in Goa, and therefore they were really pavilions to live in, and very open and connected to the outside landscape as well. And this also reflected in our architecture, our institutional architecture, where we responded by actually highlighting the roof. So this is the cathedral, which is in Karwar, where we felt that we needed to actually create an element of just a roof sort of protection. And the enclosure was, of course, local granitic stone that's available. The walls of the cathedral are actually non-structural. They're just partition walls. They just wrap around the building. And the whole cathedral is like an amphitheater. It's like steps up and down. And the roof just floats above it. So you can see the roof. So it's like tree-like in nature, and the walls are just partitions on the outside. And being a cathedral, the walls actually define small chapels, which are on the edge of the cathedral. And it has a steel main framing system, but it also has a wooden roof. So again, we're recalling crafts. We actually, the nuns of that particular parish even did the stained glass. The priests actually carved the wooden doors of the area. So it was a completely participative process of construction. This is a project we're doing in Bijapur with the same principle of creating these trees here. Now, Bijapur is a hot and dry climate. So we decided to respond in terms of cooling the building by a means of hydration. So we had these towers, which were like trees in a way, and they're made out of brick, which is a local material to Bijapur. And they're supposed to draw on air at a high level, hot and dry air. You humidify it by spraying a water mist on it, and it's taken down into these column sort of flues and enter the building and cool the building. And the building is completely flexible. As you saw from the plan, it was just a grid of towers, and you could actually change your walling systems around. So the walling system were lightweight, soundproof partitions, which you could keep on flexing the classrooms, size of classrooms, location of different rooms in the building, and so a great amount of flexibility. So slowly, I started transitioning back from the very sort of earthy, down to earth Laurie Baker thing to actually looking at an architecture which had a bit of technology thrown into it, creating lightweight structures mixed with the permanence of, say, the brick towers in this case. So this building is also another transition back to that high-tech architecture. So it's a building in Noida, which is stalled at the moment, but it's a hollow column, hollow beam system. So all the columns are made out of columns and beams made out of steel, but just framework of steel is like a like a hollow box in which all our services run. So rather than cling the services to the building, the side of the building, or under the slab or above the slab or cutting through walls, they actually ran through the structural elements, including the air conditioning system. So everything ran through the column or the beam. So even the air conditioning system was a high velocity system like you have in an automobile or a bus. And the air came directly to where you were sitting as well. So the amount of energy usage was kept to a minimum. That's the system. And these are the various sort of interventions we are planning to use in the building in terms of solar pergola, green wall, underground cooling systems, thermal radiation systems in the building that we plan. I mean, the learning of sustainability actually started years before that, when we were shortlisted to do the Pune Sustainability Center. This was supposed to be a demonstrative center for sustainability and in an active way. This is almost 15 years ago. And we're supposed to demonstrate how sustainability can work in the public domain so people could be influenced and start using these systems. So whether it's solar energy, other passive cooling systems, new materials, new technologies that could be incorporated in the building, underfloor, cooling systems as well. So all that was incorporated. So like even the auditorium had a top lighting system, an underfloor cooling system, and all connected in a sort of museum of sustainability. A great learning for us. So we work around the country, and this is a project that we did in Hampi. Hampi, as you know, as you can see from the slide, is extremely hot and dry climate, and a very interesting architecture and a very interesting landscape as well. And we were assigned to do the new cultural university in a town just outside Hampi in Kamlapur. And just the library building itself was 50,000 square feet. We said we have to recall the traditional building systems, which is really using granite. So the whole building was this giant colonnade of granite. So it kept the hot sun out from the place by this deep, almost 4-meter deep colonnade that wrapped around. And we have these gopurams. So what you see in the center is actually a gopuram, which is symbolic of like the temple entrance in the temple architecture of Hampi. But ours is not just a gopuram that is decorative, it's also a wind tower. So the slats that you see are actually let in air at a high level. They get hydrated, sprayed with water, and they enter into the building. So the building has actually three towers and one courtyard in the center. So the three towers that you see on the east, west, and south over here, actually the north, is our wind tower. So they allow it in air into the building, and they pass it through all the stacks of books, the reading areas, and it exits through that central courtyard, as you can see in the section of the building. And this drops the temperature of the building down by about 8 to 10 degrees here. So there's detail of the building. It's all built in stone. It's so we're recalling traditional building systems. The contractor wanted to build it, said, we can't do it. And I said, the people have done it 400 years ago. How can't you do it today, just building in stone, avoiding the use of concrete? And quickly they got their act together and built it there. So this is a hotel project that we're doing also now in Hampi. Again, how do we take the traditional building, stone building systems and create a thing? So it's a 3-level room thing, but again, it looks like traditional architecture built completely out of stone. And the whole idea is that the greenery actually takes over the building. So it almost looks like a ruin, a new ruin in a way. And so that's the basic plan of the building, with the various stars overlooking the paddy fields, because the landscape of Hampi is completely stunning. But it's a landscape which is, it sort of overruns the architecture. And that's exactly what we want to do in the building as well. Kerala has been another big influence for us, as you saw in the houses. And we were assigned to do, say, a few spas for the Taj, and they were inspired, they were Ayurvedic spas. So that we saw the Ayurveda came from Kerala. So why don't we look at the Kerala temples where all these sort of treatments originated from? So in this spa, which is basically an old sports building, which we completely gutted, we decided to respond to what a Kerala architecture is about and what a temple architecture particularly is about. And so what does the temple architecture have? And one of the primary things it has is actually a sequence of spaces from bright, taller outer space with darker, more intimate internal space. So we said we needed to respond to that transition from the outside to the inside. And the outside of the building also looking very much like a Kerala temple. So, and there's a ritual involved. So every evening, actually, the whole outside of the building is actually lit with diyas. So you're also bringing a certain sacredness to the space. And you move from that outer, brighter space into the inner sanctum which is the hall of contemplation, which then leads on to the various therapy rooms, which is done in earth, air, fire, water theme, which you can see on the right of the slide with the little red and blue sort of entrance areas. So on one wall, you have a wall of light, which is basically from oil lamps. On the other side, you have a water body. So you have these oil lamps, which are lit again ritually every day. And on the other side is the water body. Like the temple tanks, the water comes in. There are no windows to the space. It comes in, bounces, the light bounces off the water and enters this space, which is a very meditative space before you actually go in for treatment. I mean, we generally look at architecture as built form. And when we're designing, we at times look at an architecture of the outside as more important. So in this particular project, which is called Country Courts, which is now called Laguna Anjuna, we decided to shape the buildings by the outside. So we first defined where the streets would come, where the courtyards would be, and whatever is left over. So we're saving all the trees. Whatever's left over became the building. So you had these streets that moved around the place. And from the street, you'd enter square courtyard, circular courtyard, crescent-shaped courtyard, star-shaped courtyard. And each courtyard led on to various other rooms, and each room was unique in nature. This is a project called Nilaya, which was built almost 25 years ago. And it was one that launched us into recognition. It was rated one of the 100 best small hotels in the world at that time. And it's built right on top of a hill. So to build the structure, being right on top of the hill, it was difficult to get materials on top. So we excavated this pool. It's a giant pool, and all the rock excavated were actually used in the construction of the building. It's a very east meets west sort of appearance, but again, we use that concern for the environment and our concern for restoring craft. So everything is masonry in this building. This dome, for example, is about 11 meters in diameter. It's built completely out of mud bricks and just a cement plaster on top to waterproof it. And again, traditional, situ flooring systems in the space. There's only one concrete column in this whole building, which is where the master suite of the hotel is. And the roof is coconut wood. Coconut wood is one of the few renewable wood sources we have in India besides bamboo. Because most other wood is, we do not replenish our forest systems when we use the other sort of woods that they're. All the rooms are done thematically, and so they may have wooden roofs or brick roofs. So this is one of the rooms which is there, which is a star room. So so you respond in terms of the colors, the motifs, and everything that you use. We work in village areas, and again, the village architecture is a great inspiration for us. So it comes from the simplicity of material used, the free form nature in which they sort of respond directly to the requirements. This is a project in just out of Bhopal. It's called the Januman Retreat. It's about a 35-room hotel, and it was on an agricultural land. So we kept half the agricultural land the way it was originally. And all the rooms look onto it like little village houses. So you have little courtyards that you enter, either 3 or 5-room courtyards, where you enter the rooms, and we sort of incorporated the sort of easy way of a traditional architecture. The materials we use, the stones we use were local, the roofing systems we use local, and as much of the local artifacts we could. That's the reception area of the place. We work in the jungle a lot. So this is the lodge for the Taj. It looks very ordinary. It's actually built out of mud bricks again, but we sort of incorporate technology. So it's a double wall system. So we've got thermal cooling in it. But interestingly, we actually said that if we're coming into the jungle, we cannot take work away from the people of the village. So we actually got the men of the village to build these things, and we got the women to actually decorate them. And we use the artifacts of the village. Whatever crafts were available in the village were incorporated into, say, the courtyards were done inside, the rooms. And it's very simple. And yet it's fully air conditioned in summer and heated in winter. Everything is built into the space. So there are a number of lodges. We've now done about 30 lodges in the jungle. This is another one in a place called Rainy Pani. That's the inside of one of the rooms. It's always responding to what is local and how best can we, sort of keep the local economy, keep the local craftsmanship going. At times, we, of course, just respond to simple needs and look at the past. So this is like another room in a resort in Pench, again for the Taj, where we looked at machans, because machans are a place where people actually, sat to shoot animals in the old days. But we said now we are creating machans for people to observe animals, shoot them maybe with cameras. And so this is a little room which has these machan-like spaces, sat right in the edge of the jungle, so you actually can see tigers passing, below. And some other projects. This is another project in Kana, which is again so elevating it so your treetop level, so your bird life, everything is observable, and it's a great experience working in nature because you're connected so much to how architecture evolved right from the beginning. This is a resort which is just being completed again in Kana, where again it's connected to nature as far as possible. There's one that's just being completed in Taroba. In this one, it's a very lightweight thing. So everywhere we try to sidestep a little and try and use innovative methods. The whole resort, it's still not completed, is off the ground. The whole thing is elevated, and it allows nature to flow through. The whole idea is that animals can actually pass under this thing, and you can even observe them from above. That's the inside of the room. It's all cement board systems, actually, steel and cement board systems. So completely light. So rather than do, say, a mud wall thing, we said, okay, let's go into technology. And can we actually have something that's completely lightweight in nature? So as we move along, this is we work also in what we call CRZ areas, which are really coastal areas which are vulnerable, where we're not allowed to build something permanent. You're allowed to build something temporary. And so these are cabins that we did onto an existing house, which is in the CRZ, and it's lightweight. And we looked at the Japanese for inspiration. The Japanese are masters at creating a lightweight architecture. So all the rooms are done thematically. It's just plain woodwork with cement boards and walling systems. And even the cement board, based on the theme, we spray it according to what the theme is. So we chose, for the 4 rooms we extended here, we chose the seasons. So this is the summer room, for example. It's got summer themes. The winter room's got winter themes to it, and even got a Japanese poet to write haikus, which are poems for that particular season. And all the furniture, like the bed, for example, are elevated. So you can see that it's off the ground. There is no plinth. It's just four little metal posts on which it sits on. And it's a completely dismantleable structure as well. So we soon realized that actually creating an architecture that is lightweight and easily sort of makeable and dismantleable is really the way to go, because it costs very little. So this is for the Taj again in Bentota and Sri Lanka. Since we are a project line office as well, we're able to prototype everything, the furniture, the lighting, and everything that's needed for the structure. Again, for the Taj in this one in Goa, it's called the Lobster Shack. This, for example, cost us 9 lakhs, and they earn a profit of 50,000 rupees every day from it. So in a couple of weeks, they've actually covered the whole cost of the building itself. So it means that a temporary architecture is actually, a very interesting way, because when you build something permanent, it takes you years and years to cover the cost of the building, whatever you earn from it. But a temporary architecture is so sensible because you can even replenish it and renew it every year, and it keeps on looking fresh as well. So we started moving on this journey of a temporary architecture, an architecture which is responsive to the local materials, where people can actually participate in the construction process. And even in our office, we keep on doing these reality checks. So this is more recently for the Serendipity Festival, which is held in Goa. They wanted a pavilion which would display some of the student architectural projects. They had a competition called the Barefoot School Project. So basically, they got young architects and students of architecture to design what they thought would be a school for the teaching of crafts, especially building crafts. So we created a pavilion which will display all their entries. And our office actually got together and built it. So we built it with bamboo and steel wires. So again, here's an interesting combination of a traditional material and a material of technology. So one should not shy away from either one of them. It's nice to create a hybrid architecture. Some people lean completely against low tech, mud, earthy sort of thing, while some totally lean against a very high tech architecture. But I think the solution really lies in a combination of these. Servicing the community. So 10% of the work we do in the office is meant for social projects, so which we do pro bono. So the whole idea, so this is for the Danish aid organization, which are concerned with construction laborers. In construction laborers, you're really the teachers who could actually move to the school, and this school is built on a tractor trailer bed. And the whole tractor trailer bed is foldable. You can actually fold up the floors and come into the thing, and you can tow it from one site to another. That's the inside.
I think there's some problem at his end, some network issue. So kindly have patience, and I think he'll be back soon. Yeah, he's back. Meenal, unmute him, please. He is back.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
Very good. Yeah. The connection got unstable. So which of the last?
Yeah, this one, sir.
This one? Okay, fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, yeah, this was what we call the moving school. So basically, it's an architecture that actually moves. I talked earlier about an architecture that's temporary in nature. What about an architecture that moves and is movable? So we did this for the Dan Aid Agency, which actually takes care of children of construction workers. So the children actually are able to get an education, continuous education, because the school moves with the construction workers as well. That's an inside shot. We created these 2 foot by 8 foot panels, and they can be assembled together to create a new room every day, every sort of season that is there. So because they're allowed only 6 months of the year, and they have to take it off. So we just create sand beds, we stick in stone slabs into the edge of it, and we put these walls around and define the space. So every year, even the room configuration can change, and even the public areas are actually created with this. That's the final product of one of the years that is there. Uh, but at times, it doesn't mean that we even have an architectural solution. So this is a project that we did for the Maharashtra Tourism Development Corporation. They wanted a 40-room hotel, and we said that if instead of building a 40-room hotel, because MTDC basically wants tourism to happen in a place, why don't we give tourism to the people? And this particular village of Hadi, which is a beautiful village, has farmers, and it's got the fisher folk. So for the fisher folk, we designed these little floating hotel boats where they can actually come together and form a mini hotel of their own on the water, and daytime, move away from each other, nighttime come together and cluster. And for the farmers, we live in. And these, in this way, we were actually giving tourism back to the people. They were able to get the direct benefits rather than work in a hotel where they become bellboys and waiters and everything. They become owners of the hotel, and collectively they actually run a hotel. So if we have 40 different homes or floating sort of boats, they could actually form a 40-room hotel where the guest had a much richer experience. And all the money they were spent in actually building a hotel actually went into developing the infrastructure, their jetties, their place of worship, and all the infrastructure that was needed. So it directly benefited the people. As an architect, I've been concerned changing the way our cities are changing, especially with movements like smart city and everything. And generally, when we talk about the future of cities, we see images like this. And this is from Corbusier's image of the future city, which is this really cold, stark, car-centric city with these tall buildings. It's never going to be the future. We're far more sensible than that. But it is the future. I mean, that's the future in a lot of our cities, where the cars becoming centric. They have all these roads flying all over the place. Bombay, for example, has another coastal road. And the car is, despite all the ills that the car brings to the city, it's still being pampered and making a city car-centric, where instead we should be really looking at mass transport systems. And the human sort of level of things, pedestrianization, everything is being lost because of this automobile, sadly. But there is hope. A lot of times we see interventions, for example, in Oroville, where they actually look at cities which are far more people-friendly. This is the Galaxy, which is proposed in Oroville. Unfortunately, Oroville hasn't been that successful in sort of implementing the Galaxy model. There's a more informal model in Oroville being implemented, which is just really these clusters of communities, which is actually quite interesting because they form much more stable, much more coherent, much more sort of likable and workable sort of communities, rather than a very one-man top-centric sort of planning system in a way. So different people are trying different things. This is proposed by an architect called Sun, who I met, is for what he calls a modular city for Singapore. He had proposed, though Singapore is fully developed now, he had said, what if we had a chance to actually redesign Singapore? How would we do it? How would we make it a walkable city? So he proposed a 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer city where he put the mechanized economy, which is basically industry and manufacturing and everything in the center. And you think that's, that's very bad because that's industry and manufacturing is very polluting and very energy intensive. But the moment you do that, you're actually able to provide power, take away waste from that area. You make sure that pollution doesn't occur. And since this city is just 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer, you're never walking more than 500 meters from the edge of the city to the center of the city. And so peripheral to, say, the industry is whatever, the commerce section, then there's say, shopping, and beyond that, there's the support system of, say, schools, of hospitals, and everything that people need as a support system. And then peripheral to that is the settlement areas of housing beyond that. And beyond that is actually open fields. So because you're able to create a dense city, you're creating so much more open space. And all the cores of the city, that mechanized economy, as you call it, are connected by high-speed transport, high power systems, whatever, that actually connect up. So you're freeing up a lot of land in these particular areas. I had a chance to visit the city called Hammarby, which is in just the city outside Stockholm, which is actually what they call a brownfield project, which is an old industrial estate. And so they decided to actually look at sustainability. And this is green building today, especially with the crisis that we have in the world. We should all be designing green buildings. We should all be looking at sustainability. We should be concerned about the climate change issues of global warming. We should be concerned about the social strife that we see all over the world happening because of bad planning. So these concerns really worry me, and so I keep on looking at cities and how can we actually, as architects and designers, understand what happens, how can we intervene, even at a small level in them. So Hammarby is one place where a few architects got together and they actually proposed a city which is very low rise, so very low buildings, but they had all the basic principles of sustainability thrown, of energy, of water, of how do we create community, how do we exchange economies in the place. So everybody had their own gardens. Even though you're living in a sort of apartment, you had a garden patch that you could grow your own food and vegetables. You had an opportunity to actually share that with community. So everything was, so whether they were producing clothes, food, anything else, it was all ecological in whatever output they had. And the buildings are high density, low rise. So it doesn't mean an inefficient system. Because actually they say the most efficient building, even if you want to create a high density, is a 4 or 5 story building. It's almost a walk up building. Multi-story buildings are actually, besides being menacing and inhumane in the way they connect to the ground, they're actually inefficient in the thing. So it's a lot more higher footprint of buildings, but on a low rise is really the way to go. And it's all about creating closed loop systems. It's all about how do you look at energy, how do you look at waste, how do you look at water, and keep on recycling it within the system. And that's the most efficient way to go about it. So this city completely demonstrated that in whatever way. So about 13 years ago, I'm not just an architect. I'm also what they call an activist, somebody who actually spoils the fun of people who want to make a lot of money at the cost of the environment. So I'm part of the Goa Foundation, which is actually an environmental legal group. And so a lot of the laws that you see today on CRZ, on forests, everything have come for the whole of India, have actually come through PILs filed by the Goa Foundation, which are now applicable throughout India. Of course, they're being subverted now with sort of a government which doesn't care very much for these things, but the fight is on completely. So it's so I was really fighting against the regional plan that was very bad for Goa, the 2011 plan. And so for the first time in the history of India, we managed to block the plan and revoke the plan. So as punishment for that, they put me on board to prepare the new plan along with Charles Creer and Edgar Ribeiro. And I'm not a trained planner, but it was an extremely interesting exercise to go beyond architecture, to go beyond into the area of planning and look at how can we really influence lives in a much greater way. So we looked at what are the assets of Goa, and we need to look at these as, you don't have to be a planner to be concerned about, everything around you. An architect needs to have the sensitivity to actually look at what are the assets that we have around you? What do we need to preserve and protect? Because when we design a building in a plot, it's we're not just affecting the plot that we build on. It's also the environment. I mean, where is that plot getting its air from, its water from, and we need to look at that. So Goa has the assets of beach lands. It's got forest areas. It's got fields. It's got orchard areas, water bodies. All this needs to be protected. So we did that by actually protecting all the eco-sensitive zones. We started mapping for the first time all the eco-sensitive zones of Goa, of these fields, forests, water bodies, and said that these are completely no-go areas. You cannot build in those areas, and mapped them out so that there was no sort of vagueness about it. We looked at watersheds. We looked at where is water? Because water is the life giver of things. How does water is so important? Can we use water as a means of governance? Because water actually drives the economy, water and soil. And because our backbone of the economy is agriculture, and we need to respect that and ensure that that is protected, because we don't do that, everything else will start failing. Especially in the area of climate change, they say the sort of diseases that will come up in the future, the sort of shortages because of climate change are going to be tremendous. So agriculture is an extremely important thing that we must protect. And so we looked at where the water runs, right from the mountains right up to the sea, and how it goes through in different areas, how it benefits. So the type of agriculture even changes from one area to the other. The type of economics also does change. So the various sections that actually it moves through. So this we did along with the Royal Institute of Art of Stockholm as an exercise. They have sent their students down. We actually developed these sort of thoughts with their students, looking at watersheds and how it affected villages, and how villages could actually interdepend on each other using these fractals of development of villages. Because the village is actually a unit of development. Every village in Goa and maybe throughout India is really completely independent and autonomous, as they say. It has water bodies, it's got fields, it's got orchard areas, it's got animal grazing areas. It has an economic model. So when we looked at development, we needed people to understand what development is about. So for the first time in the history of India, we actually decided that if we are preparing the regional plan, we have to give it to the people. We have to make them understand first, and then make them decide what their future is going to be like. So when we talk about development infrastructure, a lot of people think infrastructure is all about roads and buildings and power lines and factories, and which it is, but it's also about what we call green infrastructure, which is where do we get our water from, where do we sequester our carbon dioxide, where do we get our food from, where does our waste go. All that is infrastructure as well, and that's green infrastructure. And in order to live the green infrastructure that we need, which we think is empty space, which is meant only for future building, is needed by us. And we need to map that and protect them. And so those were the eco-sensitive zones, you could say, in a way. So those times we used Google. There wasn't much of GIS systems over here. So we used Google to actually allow people to understand what the lay of the land was and what they were looking at, how they protected, to understand what basic planning was about. And we helped villages actually prepare their own plan for the future, where roads were, whatever, but things which affected them. So in this particular village, they mapped all the nature trails, they mapped the bird nesting sites, they mapped all the big banyan trees in the village. So all these things, they mapped their aspirations. They mapped where they would like a forested area, where they would like a particular type of crop to be grown, where they would like water harvesting to happen. All that was mapped. So suddenly you transition from just being an architect, designing on a simple piece of land, to actually helping people change their lives at present and the future lives of the younger generation. So they actually mapped where the grey infrastructure was, where the settlement areas were, and the areas for, commerce, whatever, and the green infrastructure. And they soon realized that they have to protect that, because to produce the amount of food they need so much of land. They need so much of area to water harvest. They need so much of area to sort of, spread the organic matter for recycling. in that space. All that need to be mapped and protected. So it was a great process to be part of, and really see people taking charge of their future. Um, so how do we actually get people excited? And we as architects have that ability to actually create excitement. So we normally do it when we show a project to a client. We say, okay, fine, this is what your house is going to look like, or this is what your hotel is going to look like. But how can we do it for people? How do we make people excited about their beach areas? So we created this thing along again with the Stockholm students. How do we actually let people identify and look at their future in a very different way, an exciting way? So how do you protect the sand dunes? How do you harvest water in the area? So creating these sort of little points in space which provided, say, shade in the beach areas, which taught people about the environment, what's going to happen to the coastal areas as a communication, and to stabilize the soil. So it harvests water, it kept the salinity away. Uh, how do we get farmers to understand that the importance of what you call chlorocorridors, which is basically how do you cross pollinate food, how do you allow sort of different crops to rotate, uh, bees, butterflies, everything is part of the ecosystem. How do you actually allow animals to flow to the area, all these in an exciting manner? How to tourism, people in tourism move away from the coastal areas? Can we provide the tourism like in Southeast Asia of where you live on the land, you live on the farmland, so people experience the growth of food, the sowing of food, the harvesting of food, the eating of the food from the land itself. So they connect immediately to the soil itself. So how can we actually get people uh, to connect to the land in some way by creating that experience and moving away from the typical model of tourism? How do we get people to experience the forest, and to connect to the forest in a very low footprint manner, so they understand the great diversity that we have in our forests, which we're losing extremely fast. You look what's happened in Uttarakhand and all. Because of development, we tend to lose that connection to it. So we need to get people to experience it in these little snippets so that they identify with, and everybody starts protecting, not just environments. Every citizen of India needs to start protecting these great assets of nature that we have. For me, a great inspiration have been architects who actually worked with the people. Christopher Day is one such architect who doesn't design individual houses, nor does he design large housing complexes. He designs with communities. So he actually brings people together, so an average 10, 12 people as families, and gets them to plan their little settlement of their own, very much like what's happening in Oroville, where people, small communities come together and they plan what the future is. So their houses turn out really small, but they have a lot of common facilities. They have maybe a large common kitchen, dining, living space, and they all share the chores, whether it's bringing up children, whether it's creating food for the community. All that is shared. So rather than individually have the chore of actually doing this daily ritual of cooking or caring for the children or cleaning, whatever, is done collectively as a community. And you can see the richness of these communities and the great sort of expression and growth, just like homeschooling, exercise have happened today, alternative methods of healing have taken place. All have actually sprung from little communities like this thing. We seem to have lost our sort of connect to the past. For example, if you look at, say, the architecture of the past and the mud architecture, you think it's old-fashioned, there are big problems with it. But you see the architecture that even mud architecture that exists today is extremely exciting and so easy and economical to build, even multi-story for that matter, in mud, for example. And even if it's temporary structures, people are still building in these ways, and we're losing it fast, no doubt. But it's a great inspiration. And even things in the past sometimes look almost like they're from the future itself. So all these are inspirations in architecture, which shows how much we've evolved over centuries and how fast we're losing it today. And it's important that we as architects really recognize that. And that, unfortunately, there are architects who actually are doing that to preserve that and bring it back into the mainstream. Hassan Fatih, for example, is one of his buildings over there, where he actually gets traditional systems going again, responds to the climate, this hot and dry climate, for example, in Egypt, where he's from. Or if you look at more home in Ladakh, where Sonam Wanchuk has worked with schools, so he responds to this cold climate, which again lets them heat into the building and keeps them warm. Or again, people like Revati Kamath, who fortunately passed away a year ago, who's really worked with traditional crafts people and created these homes which are so connected to the ground. or Neelam Manjunath, who works a lot with bamboo and other natural materials. Each one showcasing the way to the future, or even sometimes not an architect, like Didi Contractor, where at the age of 50, she started actually designing and building houses and using local craftspeople to do that in a very sensible, almost Laurie Baker-like way. So all these are great inspirations for me, of people who are actually pushing the boundaries and showing ways of where architects can be. And yes, sure, you can be an architect who are designing high-tech buildings in cities, multi-storied, but you can also be an architect that actually serves the community. The choice is yours as when you move into the field, but it doesn't mean you have to go into it immediately. You sense what your real calling is, and you respond to that in some way. But it's important that you look at what all is possible and where your heart lies before you make those decisions. But before you do that, you have to walk the talk, and we've had to do that as an office. We talk about sustainability, and we have to show that we attempt this sustainability. So we decided about 12 years ago to actually create our own community, which we call Design Valley. So we created this community of around in a small colony where all of them are architects, designers, and they've come together to actually uh, push the agenda in a collective manner. So our office is actually consists of three main buildings, which is the architectural office on the left, the product design office on the right, and the design center. And the design center is really the place where we reach out to communities, where we demonstrate how sustainable can one be, how do we actually push the agenda, make people aware of what sustainability is. So our offices are off the grid, we run on solar energy. It's not completely everything that we need, but whatever we can, we grow. And those are two of our buildings over there. And that's the inside of some of the offices that we have. But it's really not just about buildings. It's really about creating community. So our center building, which is called the Design Center, is really about bringing people on board. So we run workshops, talks, meetings, where people actually learn how sustainability can be applied in their surroundings. We're catalysts for future development, future change, and future betterment of society. Thank you.
Wow, that was simply a wonderful presentation, and we could see you as an architect playing so many different roles, sir. Right from being an architect, a designer, a planner, to an activist. It's so many roles you've already played in most of your projects, and I'm sure that I also liked one quote by you that where you said you don't need to be a planner to be sensitive towards what's happening around you. So so it's I don't have words actually after seeing this presentation. I would like the students to go ahead and ask some questions. Uh, can we ask them to go ahead with the questions, sir? If you're okay with it.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Yeah. So who's taking over? Shelly? Oh,
Ma'am, it's Pranjali here, so I'll
yeah.
be taking over.
Yeah. Yes. Please.
Uh, Thank you, sir. The presentation was truly insightful. Sir, actually, we have a few questions, and we would like that if you could answer those for us. The first question is, sir, we saw your interest towards, sustainable and natural materials. So, what do you think is the future of sustainability in the field of architecture?
So unfortunately, you have to be very careful. Sustainability is a good thing, but it's also been hijacked by business houses. So they sell you materials which they say is sustainable. They're not really. They sell you technologies which they say are sustainable. At times they're not really. So you have to apply your own mind about and define what sustainability is about. So, for example, that the building, the hollow column building that I showed you, we had to use a thin wall system over there. And we thought that, okay, fine, if we're using a thin wall system, we had a choice between, say, a natural stone or say, vitrified tile. And in your mind, you would think the natural stone is sustainable. There's not much embodied energy in it. It can really be used quickly. You're using craftspeople on board to actually, for the building to benefit. And push on the agenda of sustainability, which were highly polluting. They diverted water sources, polluted underground over there. So we suddenly realized that not a good source, where we are applying the thing of pollution to it, we're applying the thing of human rights to it. Using a vitrified tile, which actually were given a fair wage, we assessed that actually it may be more sensible to use vitrified tile rather than a natural stone. So you have to apply your own parameters and defining what sustainability is in determining that, not just take what some rating system tells you. Yes, the rating systems like LEED or Terry Griha do give you a direction, but you also have to use your own personal knowledge and concerns to actually decide what is best for the project.
Thank you, sir. The next question states, sir, do you think high-tech can fill the gaps or spaces in green architecture?
Yes, high-tech is interesting, but as I said earlier, it's how much of it you apply. So low-tech is also inspiring because it's come from centuries. The fact that we're able to cool our buildings using super efficient, air conditioning system doesn't mean that we should shy away from using natural cooling systems. So can use good insulated walls, can use, can be used, say, in a hot and dry climate, can we incorporate jollies or water spraying systems rather than air conditioning system to actually cool our buildings. So it's a combination that actually works a lot better. So whatever, say, a passive system cannot, but it's important that because any new technology that you have generally comes with a high footprint. So you need to use it with caution and in a careful manner. For example, if we look at, say, the nano world that we're going into, it's extremely high tech, and in certain cases, definitely valuable. So, but what are the implications need to be studied? Nano clothes, for example, out where you don't have to wash them at all. So it's saving on water, it's saving on detergents, on the environment. So that's a great thing. So where does nanotechnology work? Where does nanotechnology not work? Those are things that you have to really research it. It's really understand where it's coming from, what the purpose is, and what the intention is before you make a decision.
Thank you, sir. Another question from one of the senior batch is, on what basis would you hire or choose someone who wants to intern at your firm or work under you? So what are the qualities or, skills that you'll see in that student?
Yeah, we get about 600 applications a semester from students across India. So it's very tough for us to actually have a criteria. But I think for anybody to apply, the first thing that is to demonstrate a concern for the environment, whatever project you're doing, is show that you're concerned for the environment, so that you're concerned about social causes in your work. We don't look at marks at all. We look at your portfolio, and eventually, even when you graduate and you're sort of any office you join, they're going to see your portfolio and they see, how much do you understand, how much we put of your thoughts into it, how much you innovated. That's important that you demonstrate that in whatever you do, not just to get a job anywhere, but eventually as a long-term successful model is really show that concern in your design. So I think it's, if your portfolio is able to show that, you would definitely get an opportunity to join a good office. Um, so I think, uh, and do things on your own. I mean, um, a lot of times you just stick to college portfolios. Whenever you get spare time, so what is it that irks you? What is it that you think that could be solved in a way? So whether it's something that you see down the street, whether it's something, an issue that you see which is in another city maybe that you're passing through, that you can solve through design. Think it, have always a pencil and paper in your pocket. I carry a small notebook with me, so everything is just put down on it. What's the flirting? You can just, it comes and it goes, and you can forget it. So it's important that you actually note these down, and all these little thoughts actually put together into a greater design at a later point of time. You may think it's actually not worthless now, it's a very small thing, but you see the application coming into your design. So if you're able to do that, it will slowly start reflecting in your work, and anybody sensitive to actually understanding design will pick that up, and you will definitely be on the road to success.
Thank you, sir, for answering these questions. I extend my deep gratitude on behalf of the entire SAUDP family to sir, as he shared his knowledge and thought with us and spared time for us in spite of a busy schedule. I request Gauri ma'am to extend the vote of thanks.
Yes. Uh, Thank you so much, sir, for sparing your valuable time on such a short notice, and sharing your thoughts and your projects, and basically your thought process and your philosophy, which matters a lot, and which I think is the need of the hour, because this pandemic has, I think, shown us a mirror, and all of us could see the effects of the mistakes which we have done in the past, and it's time that we learn from our mistakes and reflect upon it, and actually and to the world. And I'm sure that all my students must have got inspired from whatever you've shown and whatever you have shared today. So thank you so much once again from the bottom of my heart, from all of us at Symbiosis Skills and Professional University, and the students who were keen about asking the question regarding internship. I think I'm sure they must have got the answer uh, from the most able person who should answer that. So so it's a lesson for all of you, and pick up the points and work on those, and then nothing can stop you. I'm sure sir would agree to that.
Yeah.
So once again, thank you so much for being here, sir, and hope to see you soon in person in near future, when we are all back to the normals. I would definitely like you to be here on campus and see what all things we are doing. We are taking up many live projects right now. I would also like to tell you that around our university, which is based in an urban village called Kiwale, and the students have adopted this particular village, and we have identified some issues uh, around the university and in the village, which has a small river passing by, and there are some areas which the students have identified, and they're developing those areas. They made a proposal, and we have put up the proposal to the municipal corporation, and the corporation has agreed to support the students' initiative, and all of them are actually working hands-on. It's a vertical studio kind of a thing. All those are small projects, but they are all working on it, and soon within next 2 months the projects will be completed actually on site. They'll be executed by the PCMC along with the stakeholders of the village. The villagers are also part of the entire process, and so it's a great learning experience for the students as well. So please do visit the campus and see what are things we are doing here. I would really like you to come and give us your valuable inputs as well.
Thank you very much, and I definitely will come in the moment this thing settles. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. I would request all the students to stay back.